Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here, excited about today's episode. I'm talking to Torchy Smith. Now, who's Torchy Smith? Well, he is another podcaster who has an incredible show and book where he interviews baby boomer television stars. Torchy's out of Cleveland, and in the last few years, he's managed to hook up with a lot of great TV stars from the 50s through the 70s, and really great names, man, I'm telling you. Jerry Mathers, the Beaver himself, Billy Mummy, Will Robinson from Lost in Space, lots of members of the original 50s Mickey Mouse Club. There's Stephen Furst from Animal House, Flounder, Butch Patrick, Eddie Munster from the Munsters, Cindy Williams from Laverne and Shirley, and even Clint Howard, Ron's brother, and the star himself of Gentle Ben, and also many appearances on The Andy Griffith Show and countless Ron Howard movies. Really great conversations. They are great interviews, and they're all sitting on his website, babyboomerstalkradio.com. And the name of his book is called Shooting the Breeze with Baby Boomer Stars. It has a foreword by Geraldo Rivera. And as I say in the conversation, Torchy's another one of, like us, he's a traveler. And really enjoys pop culture history. Wanted to share it, his enthusiasm with listeners. He's been doing this podcast for about 5 years or so and has amassed a great body of work, both on the website for his audio podcasts and now this book, Shooting the Breeze. So it's a real pleasure to talk to Torchy about how he got interested in this, and we talk about some of the specific stories of some of the celebrities that have fascinated him. He got a chance to talk to one of the great Disney stars, Tommy Kirk, the original star of The Shaggy Dog, and countless 50s and 60s Disney movies. And Tommy's career had a very abrupt stop, and we talk about the awkwardness of what happened. Pretty sad story, and certainly, thank God we've come a long way since those times, but I'll let you hear, Torchy talk about that story in particular. But really interesting stuff also about, like I said, the Mouseketeers and Leave It to Beaver cast members. A real pleasure to talk to Torchy Smith about his book and his podcast, and I'm happy to bring it to you today on today's Word Balloon. It's all brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you very much, League, for your support via Patreon. Patreon.com/wordballoon is the destination, and if you like what I do here at Word Balloon and want to subscribe to the cause, that's where you go. Thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by Aftershock Comics, one of the leading independent publishers. They are promoting both new and established comic books by great creators, and they're inviting comic audiences to read dangerously. They're calling 2019 the year of reading dangerously, and they are including some incredible things that need to be on your radar. Books like Pestilence, Rough Riders, Baby Teeth, Jimmy's Bastards, other things as well like Garth Ennis's A Walk Through Hell, Animosity from Marguerite Bennett. In fact, the free comic book day coming up in just a couple of weeks is going to be an issue of Animosity from Marguerite. There's also Relay, The Replacer, and new titles as well, like my buddy Tim Seeley has one called Dark Red. Pretty neat stuff. Also, there is Baby Teeth from Donny Cates, A Walk Through Hell from Garth Ennis and Gordon Suzuka. Lots of interesting stuff. Also, new things like Stronghold from Phil Hester and Ryan Kelly, Oberon from Ryan Parrott. Now, we'll be talking to more Aftershock creators here on Word Balloon on subsequent episodes down the road. But you don't have to wait to hear about some great Aftershock product that deserves your attention. Go to their website. You'll find full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on these books to order through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. Okay, without further ado, let's get into our conversation with Torchy Smith, talking about the baby boomer television legends of the 50s through the 70s. His new book and his podcast. So I'm happy to welcome Torchy Smith to today's Word Balloon. Pleased to welcome Torchy Smith to Word Balloon, a fellow podcaster, and I've heard other people talk, Torchy, about the kind of interviews we do about greats from the past as fellow travelers. I don't know if you've yes. encountered that before.
Yeah, of course, and I'd like to say hello to all my friends out there in the peanut gallery. And baby boomers, you're laughing. So you're laughing. So you know about the peanut gallery.
Absolutely.
Right away before we start, I have to ask you a question, John.
Please.
How old are you?
I am 54.
Okay. Well, you sound very young, like I do.
But, exactly. Man. No, 60.
54.
Go ahead.
Yeah, 54, you're not going to know everything that I have to say about baby boomers and celebrities, but there's a retro kind of generation going on of interest. So Howdy Doody or Buffalo Bob, at least some of the people like yourself have heard of them.
Absolutely. Well, I sadly remember, because it wasn't as good as, from what I can tell, of the original run. I do remember when they brought Howdy Doody back in the 70s, certainly. And
oh, did they?
yeah, there was like, it was from Florida, kind of like when Jackie Gleason moved to Miami or whatever. But yeah, I remember even the opening was Florida, the Sunshine State, home of Doodyville, USA, and it's like, yeah,
I vaguely remember that. I guess all the baby boomers who watched it in the first place were so stoned that they just that they thought they were on an LSD trip when they saw Howdy Doody again.
That's amazing. That's awesome. And truly, I had God, I'm getting over a cold, so my voice will crack every now and then, like I'm 14. But I had older brothers and sisters and older cousins, and you and I both come from the 3 to 5 channel, as far as television goes,
sure,
world. And, our options for media certainly weren't as vast as they are today. So from the classic movies being shown on syndicated TV, on local TV, and certainly, I'm part of the rerun generation. So no, I love the book. I think you did a hell of a job, and you're doing a great job with your podcast as well. I think it's terrific, man. Shooting the Breeze with Baby Boomer Stars. That's the title of Torchy's book. And Torchy, what's the name of the podcast again?
Baby Boomers Talk Radio.
There you go. So you know exactly what you're getting.
Right. Just Google that, and actually Google Torchy Smith, and I will come up, pages about myself, and if you get to Torchy's Tacos, stop. That's not me. The next one is Torchy's Tacos. But, you mentioned something, and before I forget, because I'm an old guy, let me go back. You mentioned about whether you had 3 or 5 stations. I mean, to start out, we had 3 stations.
There you go.
It was NBC, ABC, and CBS. But it's important that I cover this because people a little bit younger than you won't remember the test pattern,
sure,
and how we had to warm up our eyeballs when we came home from school with the test pattern before TV even came on. So many of the stars I've talked to, well, not many, but a few of them have mentioned that, maybe we weren't that talented. It's just that you guys had nothing else to watch. So, where are you going to turn your station to? Something like gardening or something. There was nothing else to watch. So, a lot of things that happened on TV were things that the next day, right away, people on the playground, kids on the playground, would talk about. And we're all on the same plane. Yeah. Just like if you could think about rock and roll music back then, we only had 1 or 2 stations that would play rock and roll music.
Yeah.
And it was the same songs over and over again, just like the movie American Graffiti. You could turn on the station, put down your top, and go through the hamburger stand, and it was like stereo because everybody was listening to the same thing.
Absolutely.
Today, I had my grandchild over, and, after school, I had a babysitter or something. Okay, what are you going to do? Let's watch TV. All right, let's turn something on. You want this? Nope. Want this? Nope. Want this? Nope. Want this? Nope. We go through about 15 things that she has to choose from. Okay, I'll watch that. So I'm sure they're not all on the same plane like we were.
Well, and also, yeah, go ahead. No, please.
No, and which dilutes the popularity. So, yeah,
sure.
Now you go ahead.
Oh, no, absolutely. Well, first of all, what city did you grow up in?
I grew up in the slums of Shaker Heights, Ohio.
Okay.
You know what Shaker Heights, Ohio is?
Well, I know Ohio. Tell me about the slums of Shaker Heights, Ohio.
Okay. Well, Shaker Heights was the richest community in the United States at one time.
Oh.
And it had the number 1 school system, but I didn't know any better. I lived in the, just the middle class part of it, which looked like the slums of Shaker Heights. So, and also in those days, because of segregation and actually boundaries in neighborhoods of the older cities, we kind of lived in a balloon because nobody moved in or moved out very often. So when we have our class reunion, it's not your high school class reunion, it's your childhood reunion. And so it was a unique spot that I moved in. A side note is I did have a very well-off kind of childhood. Then my father had tried to expand, lost all his money, and then he had the nerve to die.
Wow.
So then there were people I hung around with. Their cabanas were as big as my house. So and I find it fascinating that Geraldo, who's a friend of mine, it's a long story in the book, but Geraldo now lives in Shaker Heights.
Oh, wow.
Who did the foreword of my book. Yeah, who did the foreword of my book.
Right, yeah, I was going to mention that. Now, Shaker Heights, is that like the Cleveland market? Is it around that area?
Yes, it's the Cleveland market.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm a Chicago guy, and I'm still in Chicago. And, well, this is something that does come up sometimes in Word Balloon, where I talk about how, you know, prior to really the country and the world being hooked together, not only by the coaxial cable of the 50s and 60s that gave us coast-to-coast broadcasting, but certainly satellite broadcasting made us global. But, you know, every big city, and even smaller towns as well, you know, they were on their own little media empires and
That's right.
markets.
That's right.
So, you know, you grew up with the same kind of, I'm sure, morning kid show host.
Absolutely.
And when you said the Peanut Gallery, certainly, as you said, Howdy Doody, growing up in Chicago, we had Bozo. And
that's right. Bozo came. Yeah, right. Bozo. Yeah, but we had our copies of Bozo. See, Bozo was very popular, and I don't think it was very. Well, he was kind of national, but everybody. I'm glad you mentioned that. Every town, every market, major market, had afternoon cartoon shows, or maybe it was King Jack. Here in Cleveland, it was Barnaby with he played Popeye, and he had this invisible parrot. And then one day he lost it, and he really thought he had an invisible parrot. And they put him at a mental institution.
Wow.
Yeah, and so every town had their little local personalities that showed the Little Rascals, and then later it was syndicated for the Three Stooges. So
and of course more horror movies as well. And I've had Svengoolie, and again, Svengoolie, Chicago product, but now a national name. And no, that whole era of packaging late movies and various things kind of gave birth to these kinds of, you know, local celebrities and local horror stars. Who was your monster guy in Cleveland?
Well, I don't want to brag, but our monster guy became a bazillionaire. His name was Goulardi.
Yes, of course.
And Goulardi was copied. We had the original guy. And Goulardi went on, he left Cleveland, all of a sudden he just disappeared. His name was Ernie Anderson. And in the Carol Burnett show, she would say, and here's a friend of Tim Conway's, which he was, Tim Conway's from Cleveland, and local sports guy, or local weather guy, whatever, and stand up, Ernie Anderson. And he'd just stand up, and nobody understood who he was. And he became the number one voiceover and made a ton of money. He was the voice of ABC, The Love Boat.
Yes, that rich broadcaster voice, absolutely. The Love Boat. Yeah, absolutely, man. No, you can find YouTubes of Ernie Anderson doing promos for ABC. And again, Torchy, like I said, I'm right behind you, man. I imagine we're close enough in age that a lot of these references I get. And Ernie Anderson, I didn't realize he was Goulardi. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, and he was, I mean, this sounds ridiculous now, absolutely ridiculous, but he was the rage of Cleveland because he showed these terrible monster movies, and he'd say they were terrible, and then he put himself in it, you know, like running around the monster, you know, and like that was like the highest technology, and nobody had ever thought of that or done that. Like, how do you get the rights to do that? You know, he's making fun of these movies. And we thought it was hilarious. We never saw any technology like that.
That's amazing. Kind of like blue screen, basically, where he would superimpose himself and put himself in. Yeah. That's I had no idea. That's the kind of shtick that he would do. That's wonderful, man. No, I am fascinated by the media that came as I was growing up and what I saw in reruns. And you know, again, I'm partially a product, as I said, of my older siblings and cousins who you got their Hardy Boy books when they were done reading them. You got various pulp things. I mean, I grew up reading reprints of the Shadow and Dark Savage pulps and things. Were you a comic book guy growing up?
Oh my God, oh my God. I want to go to my mother's grave and say, I told you not to throw those comic books away. I had tons of them.
What were some of your favorite titles?
Oh, well, besides Superman and all those.
Cleveland's very own Superman, absolutely.
Yeah. We also had when we had to read a book, and we had to read a lot of books when we went to Shaker, we would buy the classic comic books like Ivanhoe.
Yes.
So we didn't have to read the book. So you bought the comic book Ivanhoe.
Yeah, they were like the Cliff Notes of their day. I mean, again...
Yeah, right. The Cliff Notes. Right.
I think classics.
Oh, I have stories about Cliff Notes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, man.
But we had Archie. I don't know why I liked Archie. I identified with Archie for some reason. I don't know.
I loved
Maybe
Archie.
It was,
I think that was no, absolutely, especially for humor comics. I thought Archie was great.
Probably all the gay guys liked Archie. I don't know.
Well, that's true. No, you're right. And honestly, they've responded to that. And Kevin, are you a gay person? Forgive me.
No.
Okay, but Kevin, I don't know if you know about Kevin Kelly. Kevin Kelly is a very popular gay character they've introduced in Archie. And I've got friends who own comic stores. I've seen it happen myself where, gay people who had never read Archie before are coming in and saying, tell me about Kevin Kelly. And it's awesome. Yeah. It's fantastic. And that's, honestly, I think that's one of the coolest transformations of the Archie publishing. Because they also, as you know, I'm assuming Torchy, they used to make a Catholic comic book called Chuck White, and Chuck White was kind of a Judeo-Christian kind of good kid kind of parable, just teenage stories and stuff, clean cut stuff. But they were a very patrician publisher for a long time, and then the grandson of one of the founders, John Goldstein, who runs it now. Really, just something. Archie's for everybody. We're really gonna take some steps forward. And honestly, man, I think it's amazing, and I love that they've retained the spirit and the fun of the original books, but they've found ways of telling new stories, and they get inventive. Are you watching Riverdale? Have you? I know it's a teen show, and I don't know how you feel about teen shows, but I do appreciate kind of the weird Twin Peaks spin that Riverdale puts on the Archie people.
I've heard about Riverdale. I haven't watched it, but let me go back and tell you why I liked Archie. I mean, I'm not gay, but I do remember Veronica and her big boobs. We didn't have anything like that in comic books,
Sure.
But
no, that was cool. Are you kidding? Absolutely, Betty and Veronica. They're the original. Before Ginger and Marianne, there was Betty and Veronica. Absolutely, man.
Yes, and the way they drew them.
Dan DeCarlo.
We never saw it. I mean, this sounds kind of not crude, but there was a lot of drawings in Playboy that you could see from Vargas cartoons, but there was never anything in comic books like Superman. Lois Lane, they didn't really make her stacked.
Right, I'm with you. No, I get it. And although we did have, now I don't know if you were a fan of the Phantom Lady from the 40s and the 50s. And
I can't remember her.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, that was a pretty sexy costume back in the day. But no, you're right, man. No, it was the kind of good girl pinup art and everything. That was kind of simplified for comics. But yeah, Betty and Veronica were amazing. Absolutely, man. Yeah. You're killing me. Yeah.
Let me tell you one more thing before we get out of the comic book era. I did love Superman, and I had a fight with my brother every day after school. Of course, he beat the crap out of me almost every day. But he wanted to watch Superman. He wanted to watch The Lone Ranger, and I wanted to watch Superman, and they were on at the same time. and so we fought every day. But the interesting thing about Superman is Superman was created by two Jewish guys here in Cleveland.
Yep.
And as I won't go through the whole history because you could do a whole show on Superman, obviously. and when the Reeves part came on with
George
the
Reeves?
director of that.
With
the first the guy who passed away,
Christopher Reeve. Christopher Reeve.
Christopher Reeve.
Go on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. When he did that, and they did the first Superman movie, they really didn't need the rights. They had them from. Well, they did need the rights. They bought them from the
Warner's.
Yeah. But so the guys who wrote it obviously got no royalties, and they felt so bad for them that they gave each one $10,000. And the two brothers did not talk to one another. They were at war with one another. They moved to L.A. separately, just happened to live a few blocks away from each other and never talked to each other again.
Wow. Siegel and Schuster, the creators of Superman.
Yeah, right. They were, and my mother went to
heard that.
high
That's
school.
Amazing. Yeah.
I know. And my mother went to high school with them.
Wow.
So they were going to start like we have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and we have some other museums here. So they try to start a Superman
museum,
museum,
and the house,
and it kind
the Siegel house too.
Yeah, right. That kind of fell flat, but they had a Superman poster. This was years ago. I forgot how old I was. It was I just got married. Well, I took my kids to this thing. They had the original Lois Lane from the George Reeves TV program come out and sign autographs on this huge poster that they only made a limited edition, and I have one of them.
Oh, that's
and shows
great.
Superman with Cleveland in the background.
That's fantastic.
So,
Noel Neal.
So, boy, oh man, you that's who it was. And I was so thrilled to talk to her because I said I loved your car in that because my mother had the same Nash Rambler.
Oh, that's crazy.
She says, it's somebody bought that Nash Rambler. But anyways, so all these memories flood back, which I'm not too sure kids today are going to have those same memories because the reason we have them, like I said before, the piece of pie of the TV industry was 3 pieces of pie. Today it's 126.
Oh, absolutely, man. Oh, yeah. No, and it's on the one hand, and again, my podcast is nostalgia-based and also comic book-based, and it comes up all the time. It's an embarrassment of riches of how many different films and television shows are being based on comics and really good stuff. And there's not enough time in the day to watch everything. Because it's not just the superhero stuff; it's the horror stuff as well, and the science fiction stuff. And you're right, and certainly the streaming channels, along with cable and over-the-air networks now. So no, it's crazy. Did you have a radio background before you started doing this podcast?
Not at all.
Really?
Not even close.
Good for you, man.
Really,
that's awesome.
Not at all.
So how'd you stumble into this?
You didn't read chapter 1.
Talk to me. Wow, this is for the listeners as well, man.
I know. I'm just trying to be funny. Well, that brings to the point of my name being Torchy. I was born with bright red hair. The nurse brought me to my mother. She said, "Here's your little torch," and I was named Torchy. And I could say I was a cute little redheaded kid who thought, gee, I'm seeing these people on TV. I can do that. I always wanted to be a child star. The only one problem was I didn't live in Los Angeles. So as time went on, being someone who had connections through Shaker Heights, some of my friends, a few of them, made it big in Hollywood. I have a friend named Bennett Tramer who created Saved by the Bell.
Wow.
Yeah, and a lot of that's based on his memories from Shaker.
Crazy.
And then I had a friend of mine, Scott Siegler, who was CEO of Paramount.
Wow.
Paramount Television.
Sure.
So I called Scott and said I want my kids to maybe be in this business, and I said I wanted to be an intern. He says, "Well, what's that?" I said, "What do you mean, what's that?" I explained what an intern was, and he said, "Well, gee, that doesn't sound fair. They work for free." I mean, he's building sets in Japan, and opening sets, and so he said, "Well, let me put you in contact with another friend of ours who had wrote a couple screenplays out there, and who I knew quite well." So he got my daughter an internship. She got, to make a very long story I got her in the business. She was first job was working on the Jerry Lewis Telethon, which was a job for 3 months, booking people, and she signed a year's lease. And so she needed something after that. Her story's quite. Again, her next job was at the E! Channel through connections, and she was working on True Hollywood Stories. When the E!
Love
Channel
that show.
first
Absolutely.
started, yeah. And I have a few credits on there because they used to call me up and didn't know anything about the Little Rascals and Stymie, and they didn't have their stuff in yet to do the research. So I helped them, and I even had a couple of credits. So then she went on to MTV, and actually she worked for Geraldo for a while. Her best friend married Geraldo from Shaker here. Yeah, and then my son, it was his turn, who his long story, he had good internships, and it cost me money for him to go out there, and eventually he got well situated and became a talent agent for little kids, and it's quite a story about him. And then when they realized that to make this big money, it means nothing out in L.A. after living where I live, they came home for various reasons. My daughter was in the business for 12 years. My son was in the business for 5. And they said enough, and for certain reasons of their marriages, they came home back here, and they lived back here. I never thought I'd get them back here. So then after I sort of retired, I said, well, now it's my turn. And how I started this, first of all, I was somebody who was in business and, unlike my friends, was somewhat tech savvy.
Okay.
And you can't do anything without being somewhat knowing how to work the internet and everything. So my book is about how I got started, and there's kind of a thread, as you've read, from chapter to chapter, how it progressed. And I'll skip a lot of that and go to the first interview. Major interview was with one of the Little Rascals. I'm sorry, one of the Mouseketeers, the original Mouseketeers, probably the least well-known, who had gotten fired, and he's somewhat of a motorcycle guy and like a Hell's Angels, and he was very bitter about his whole experience about being a Mouseketeer, had no contact with any of the rest of them, and he certainly didn't want to talk to me. I was a nobody. And I kind of hit it off with him, and he started opening up to me, and I said, well, we should have just taped what I was on the phone with him a half an hour. Why don't we tape this? And then he said, I didn't ever want to hear the word Mouseketeer again. And by the way, his name is JJ.
JJ
so
Solari,
Google,
yes.
Yeah. And I said, in the beginning, he said, if you're hearing this interview, let me just tell you, life ended with the Mouseketeers. And there's a reason why child stars go berserk and blow their brains out at some point.
Wow.
And they can't make sense of everything. And from then on, the whole thing was almost a downhill.
Wow.
Like, oh my gosh. I'm thinking, if the other Mouseketeers hear this, or Walt Disney could hear this, they roll over their grave. So the next person I tried to contact was one of the most popular Mouseketeers, and that was Cubby.
Cubby O'Brien, absolutely, man.
Yeah, Cubby O'Brien, the drummer.
Yes,
and
who give him some bands that Cubby played with as an adult. Because
Spike Jones. He was, what's the couple that...
the Carpenters, right? Wasn't he with the Carpenters?
The Carpenters, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And he knew all his father was a drummer, his brother was a drummer. I mean, he was very talented.
Yeah, pretty cool.
And he still tours with who's the girl in The Jerk who was with Steve Martin? Bernadette Peters.
Wow.
Yes, he tours with her.
Crazy.
So anyways, I get a hold of his wife, Holly, and I said, well, listen, I had my first interview. I told her my whole story, and she said, who'd you interview? And I said, JJ. She kind of laughed. She says, really? He doesn't even give it, or he has nothing to do with the rest of the Mouseketeers. I said, well, that's why I went to him first. And she said, well, yeah, I'd love to hear that. So I got it to her in a MP3 file, and Cubby listens to it, who knows nothing about computers. And he calls me up, and he says, I'm laughing. He says, I want to set the record straight. He gives me an interview, and through his interview, I get the rest of the Musketeers that are living, and then it took off.
That's fantastic.
Then it really took off.
Yeah, that's the first section of your book is with these former Musketeers, and these are the Musketeers of the 50s. And as you said,
and not only the Musketeers, there are a lot of people like Spin and Marty that had programs on the Musketeers.
Yes,
they used to do little stories. You mentioned the Hardy Boys.
Yes,
with Tim Considine and Tommy Kirk. Tommy Kirk was in Old Yeller. Was a great actor,
tremendous actor.
And,
I'm a big Tommy Kirk fan. Even made a couple teen, if not beach movies. Other Frankie Avalon sort of, it's those American International pictures of the 60s, which are, the foundation of were the beach movies. But I know he did like a ski movie maybe with Dwayne Hickman or somebody. And if
you're right on.
Yeah,
you're right. Very good.
Torchy, I'm telling you, like I said, kindred spirits here, man. I watch the same stuff. And no, they're fascinating. And I had not on my podcast, but working in Chicago radio and television, got to meet Frankie Avalon, and all I wanted to hear about was making the beach movies and stuff. But you're right, Tommy Kirk, who is in your book, tremendous teen actor, and I'm a huge fan, and really one of those foundation stars of the Disney television empire. He was amazing.
Let me tell you about him, and this is not. Now we're going to get sad. Now it's the sad part.
Okay.
Not everybody ended up sad, by the way. Everybody thinks, oh, my gosh, these guys from being teen stars, they got used and abused. Well, that's a good part true. But not all of them ended up that bad. Well, Tommy did have it bad. And what happened with Tommy is he started to do movies like Old Yeller. And I told him, I said, there are some kids who were kid stars, but you were an actor,
yes.
A real actor
yes.
that happened to be a kid.
Absolutely.
And he could really act. Well, it turns out he was about 18 years old. He's in a swimming pool with a 16-year-old boy, public pool, and they're fondling each other.
Ah.
And, Tommy knew he was gay, and somehow the mother of the other boy found out.
Wow.
And went to Disney.
Wow. Well, that's the era, man. Yeah.
And threatened Disney. Well,
that explains a lot.
Yeah, the word got around, and even John Wayne, who was in a movie with him, said, "I don't want anything to do with this kid anymore."
Wow, that's amazing with John Wayne, because meanwhile, he's making The Alamo with Lawrence Harvey, who was gay. He's making The Undefeated with Rock Hudson, who was gay. But go on, please. This is before that. Nobody was out. Yeah. I understand. Yeah.
So.
Wow.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's tragic, because like you said, he was...
Yeah, he got on drugs. He started doing beach movies, and then he started doing less and less. The end of the story is that he got into drugs, he got into a lot of bad things, and he wanted nothing to do with Hollywood. He left Hollywood and became a carpet cleaner.
Wow.
And drapery cleaner. And then eventually he started his own business. He lives in Las Vegas. Every once in a while he'll pop up at a show, a signature show. He told me that he was giving me the last interview he's ever going to give.
Jeez. Wow.
And I even have a relative that tried to find him through me, and then he doesn't even want to talk to her. Wow. He has bad feelings about and I won't go any further than that. I won't mention any names. But he's friends still with Beverly Washburn, who also lives in Vegas, who was the girl in Old Yeller.
Oh, wow.
Who is, if you may not know the name Beverly Washburn, but if you Google her, you'll say, "Oh my God!" And actually, she was in a lot of Superman. She was in the original Superman movies as a little girl.
Oh, wow.
and in Rin Tin Tin, and I mean dozens of shows. And that's another thing back then. They used to send kids over and over again in Wagon Train, and they would pop up in a Twilight Zone.
Sure.
And, So she still has dinner with him once in a while. I won't say he looks pretty bad.
No, that's heartbreaking. Am I right? Wasn't he in one of the Disney documentaries? Maybe not, because it sounds like, I don't know what his relationship with Disney would be today. It sounds like it probably wouldn't be good.
Well, if he was in Disney today and came out gay and told everybody I'm gay, and he tripled his income.
Well, I understand, and that's heartbreaking. I saw on Netflix the Tab Hunter documentary, and it's sad. It really is, and
he was in Shaggy Dog. Don't forget, I got to tell your audience, they may not know about him in Oscar, but the original Shaggy Dog with Fred McMurray.
That's right.
All those other a few other ones.
He was a great actor. He was terrific in the TV shows and the films. No, I enjoyed Tommy Kirk's work, and that's the thing. Well, and thankfully, things have changed, and people are more accepting of various people's orientations these days. So that's amazing. And again, you could read Tommy Kirk's story in Torchy's book. So, dude, I'm telling you, this is so amazing. What year did you start your podcast?
Oh, God. It's been about 3 years.
Okay. Hey, man, God, good for you, man. You're very productive for only 3 years. Jeez, I've been doing mine for 14 years. That's fantastic, man.
Wow.
No, but also, and truly, forgive me, I don't mean to sound condescending when I say this, but really, good for you being tech savvy, because, again, I have a background in television and radio here in Chicago, and I would tell a lot of my contemporaries, once I started in 2005, I'm like, hey, and it's only gotten worse in terms of how competitive and how much downsizing there's been in the broadcast business, certainly locally. And I'm like, you guys should really preserve yourselves and preserve your audience and start a podcast. And, some of them thought I was, speaking gibberish and they didn't know what I was talking about. But the smart ones have done it. And, no, it's great. And now, that's the thing. You've created your own little platform to do these interviews. You've got the knowledge to be able to have good conversations with these people. And that's fantastic. And also, good Lord, I'm congratulations on coming up with this book as well. And it's great because the book is different from the podcast. I mean, you'll hear the actual conversations, but you take quotes, and it's a very readable, you're writing a narrative with all of these guests and inserting some quotes here and there. But then also you can go on the Spreaker Network and go to your website as well and give people your website, by the way.
It's www.babyboomers.talkradio. And that's plural, Baby Boomers Talk Radio. And if you also just Google my name, Torchy Smith, TorchySmith, I have my own YouTube station, channel rather. And at one point in my life, believe it or not, I was trained to be a graphic designer in the old days where you actually had to cut up pieces of paper and paste them down.
Sure.
And so I was always interested in that kind of medium. So I learned how to Photoshop and I learned how to put some videos together. So on most of my people that I've done a podcast on, I've also done a little video montage. So if you go to Torchy Smith on YouTube, some of that will pop up also.
That's outstanding, man. No, and really, I love these names. I mean, you did two great interviews with people from Animal House, Flounder, Stephen Furst,
and
Niedermeyer, of course, Mark Metcalf, who's living in Milwaukee these days. And I've had the pleasure of talking to Mark on my podcast, and also Tim Matheson last year I was able to get. And God, I hope you get a chance to talk to him, because he's got a great and vast television and film career, and he has great stories about his various co-stars in the various TV and films that he's made, both as an actor and a director, too.
Yeah, I've met most of them. I was at a signature show, and Mark knows me pretty good, so he introduced me around.
Excellent.
And I don't want to correct you, but Mark now lives in Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, wow! Because he had a great restaurant in northern Milwaukee, the northern part of the city and stuff. And this was 10 years ago and stuff. And I know he was really involved with the Milwaukee Film Festival. So I guess he moved. Wow.
Yeah, he moved to Columbus with his daughter.
Okay. Cool.
There's some great stories about Animal House.
Oh yeah.
And I still talk online with James Doughton, who was Marmalade, and he doesn't want to do an interview, but he'll talk to me all the time.
Crazy.
He just doesn't want to do an interview. I mean, if I go to my deathbed tomorrow, the last thing I'll think about is, oh, I got to meet all these people from Animal House.
Sure.
That was my biggest thrill. And, well, there's some other thrills of people I've met, but I absolutely loved Animal House because we were Animal House. I mean, you have to live that generation to really appreciate it.
I hear you.
Every one of those incidences was so similar. And the stork is the guy who wrote Animal House, Dave Kinney.
Yes.
Who is also from Cleveland and also from near where I'm from. And the stork. So there's such a rich history of each one of those people. But I got to tell you something fast about Stephen Furst, who passed away.
Yeah.
He was Flounder and Dorfman,
Yes.
was his, and I call him up, and it wasn't going good. The connection wasn't good. It just
I know that feeling.
And he was kind of grouchy, and he has a production company called Curmudgeon Pictures. And I realized, oh my God, this isn't the guy,
the happy, friendly guy that was Flounder.
Yeah. Can I have 10,000 marbles? It isn't that guy. He isn't that guy. So, anyways, I didn't realize later how sick he was.
Yeah.
And I probably had the last interview with him.
Wow.
At length before he passed away.
Heartbreaking, man. No, I know. And, he's another guy that the nerds all love because of his involvement in Babylon 5. He was one of the main characters in Babylon 5.
Right.
And, of course, St. Elsewhere. And, no, he's, I enjoyed his body of work. He was a terrific actor. And, Tim Matheson had really nice things to say about Steve Furst. So I can, and also
let me test you.
Go ahead.
Oh,
I was going to ask you.
I was going to test you one thing before we leave him.
Good.
Okay, how did he get his start?
Oh, I know this story. He didn't he put his resumes inside pizza delivery boxes and his headshot?
Exactly. He stapled them to the outside. And I forgot the guy's name now, but he was one of the producers of, what's his name? I can't remember now. But the producer of Animal House, they were casting and saw it, and that's how he got.
Wow.
That's how he got the part.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that direct. That's amazing. That's really cool. Now I wanted to ask because Netflix produced a movie about Doug Kinney, the stork.
Wow,
and
really?
And it's interesting because it's populated with a bunch of current comedians. Will Forte, who used to be on Saturday Night Live, played young Doug Kinney.
Yeah.
And it's the whole history of the National Lampoon. And also there's that wonderful documentary, Brilliant, Stoned, and Dead, about the National Lampoon that's also, I think, on Netflix.
Right.
But, this was a fictionalized version. And also I can sympathize in terms of sometimes when you do interviews and you have bad connections. I spoke to Tony Hendra, who was Spinal Tap's manager in the Spinal Tap movie. And he was a founding, National Lampoon Radio Hour and magazine guy. And I've posted it on Word Balloon, and it sounds like he's on shortwave radio, and it's 1940. I mean, it's just a terrible connection. But I knew this was going to be my only chance to talk to him, and he had such amazing stories that I told my audience, I'm like, look, I know the audio's terrible. Bear with us because, he was at Cambridge University, a couple years younger than the Pythons. So he had this amazing comedy history. And I'm like, this is, again, this stuff fascinates me. And I know it fascinates my audience. And I know that's why they'd be interested in hearing your podcast and reading your book. I love the people that you've spoken to. I mean, my three sons people like Stanley Livingston.
Great guy.
And I'm bummed. And I also have encountered the same problem sometimes. I know you've tried to get Tim Considine on. Am I saying his name right? And I guess he doesn't do interviews.
Yes, he doesn't. His name is Tim Considine. And he played with Tommy Kirk. He was with the Hardy Boys.
Yes.
And he also played on Disney's
Spin and Marty.
Spin and Marty.
Big fan. Oh, God, yeah, that was an awesome show, man.
He was Spin, but I did get Marty. I did interview Marty of Spin and Marty.
What was Marty's name?
And, pardon?
What's Marty's real name?
Stollery.
Oh, David Stollery.
Stollery.
Sure. Okay, cool. Wow. No, I like,
Yeah.
and that was two kids, kind of a city slicker kid who goes to a boys' ranch,
Right.
and
Right.
like kind of
Right.
learns the cowboy way. It really is like city slickers. Before Billy Crystal had to have Spin and Marty in his mind when he created City Slickers, because
There
and
you
again,
go. Yeah.
these are timeless. I mean, that's the thing. These are those '50s shows,
Yeah.
dude. I'm sure you were a Zorro fan with Guy Williams
Oh, not only was I a fan, I interviewed his daughter.
and his son. Oh, you mean the real Guy?
I've met his son. I've met his son, but I didn't interview him.
Oh, excuse me.
I
I figured you meant his television kids, but okay, you met the real Guy Williams' son.
The real kids. Yeah. The real kids. Oh, you're talking about Lost in Space.
Sure.
With Bill, I've interviewed Bill Mooney, who is the Lost in Space
Will
guy.
Robinson, absolutely.
And Will, and Angela Cartwright.
Penny. Yep.
And that she goes back to
Make Room
the
for
Danny
Danny.
Thomas show.
Yes.
Make Room for Danny. And I told her I've only loved two girls that were on TV when I was a little boy, and it was Angela Cartwright and Karen from the Mouseketeers. And
Hilarious. Yes.
I told Angela I used to kiss the. But she called me up. Yeah, but she called me. Who is this? This is Angela Cartwright. I said, no, really, who is this? She said, no, this is Angela Cartwright. And because I was like from an email like a week ago, and I said, oh my God. When I was a kid, I always wanted Angela Cartwright to call me up and go out with you. But I said, but not at 71. It's somehow it lost its thrill, but I'm glad to talk to you anyway.
That's hilarious. No, you're right. That I mean, she was a lovely young woman, and absolutely, you go to that last season of Lost in Space when she's full-fledged teenager and stuff. Yeah, she's very pretty, beautiful eyes, absolutely. And I don't blame you, man. No, good Lord, I know. I met Barbara Eden in the '90s, and she used to come to Chicago. Her husband was a businessman from Chicago. And I'm like, Miss Eden, you'll forgive me. I had one of my first crushes over you, and she gave me the just ugliest look and like, how charming. And I'm like,
yeah,
sorry.
No, she's a little bit of a hard ass. So, yeah.
At least Marianne was cool. From Gilligan's Island, Dawn Wells was very sweet. And I said, I got to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I got why everybody loved Tina Louise Ginger. I said, but I always thought you were the hottest. She goes, you're damn right I was the hottest. And I'm like, good for you, lady. So, yeah, funny stuff, man.
Yeah,
No,
she's run into some problems lately.
Yeah.
I won't go into it, but Dawn is still. Last time I saw her, she still looks pretty damn good.
Oh yeah,
for her age.
she does. Me TV is based here in Chicago. Weigel Broadcasting produces Me TV, and God, I'm so glad they've reached out to a lot of these surviving actors to make promos for them.
Sure.
And yeah, Dawn, good Lord, she had a real serious run with Me TV, doing tons of promos with them and everything. So no, it's pretty cool.
Talk about Me TV and promos. Kathy Garver is a very savvy businesswoman. Everything with her is business. And she was Sissy on Family Affair.
Uh-huh.
And as soon as I saw a commercial for Me TV and Kathy Garver was on it, I said, "Yep." She called them up and pushed her way right in there.
Oh yeah,
she doesn't miss a trick.
That's awesome, man. Honestly, and I'm glad that truly. I mean, because like you said, sometimes these stars have sad after stories when the TV shows are over, and I'm really glad that some of them are tenacious enough to go on the convention route and then do the autograph shows and
right.
No, and I'm a big Comic-Con vet and been going for 14 years, and it's great to see that it has expanded, and also like-minded conventions have popped up. And I know there have always been nostalgia conventions with panels and things like that, but again, now they're all starting to get tech savvy, and they're videotaping more of the panels, and they're putting them online. And no, I think that's terrific, and I hope that they are able to embrace their success on TV or film or whatever. And again, there's a nice fan base out there that they can still connect with, and hopefully generate some income for themselves.
Yep. Are you a big Leave It to Beaver fan?
Sure.
Okay, so here's I have a lot of stories about them, but when you mentioned something about being rediscovered or whatever, I attend these shows, and I've helped out some of the stars. And one of the people I represented was by a phone call. And I know Lauren Dow. I got to know her through Tony Dow.
Okay.
And
is that his daughter?
Yeah, no, his wife.
His wife, excuse me.
She runs everything.
Oh, sure. That happens a lot where the spouse is kind of the business person for this celebrity.
Yeah, she runs everything. Yeah. And I could do a whole program with the Leave It to Beaver crowd. So anyways, so I see they're appearing for the first time. They always put it on. They don't want anything to do with the autograph show. They're appearing for the first time. So I asked her about other characters. So why wouldn't they appear maybe with them? So I found Judy Hensler,
wow,
who was her real name is Jerry Weil, and she was the girl who said, "Miss Landers, Beaver didn't do his homework again." You know,
yep.
And she was and had the pigtails, and
yeah, she's like
older
Lucy.
Than the rest
She was Lucy to Beaver's Charlie Brown, basically.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So she had been on 50 programs. And so I asked Tony Dow's wife, what happened to her? She said, we have no idea. I haven't seen her in like 20 years or something. And she didn't show up. We had this dinner one time. She never showed up. Well, I have tricks of finding people, ways of finding people. And I call her up, and I got talking to her. And I said, yes, I've interviewed Jerry Mathers, and I've interviewed Tony Dow, and I'd like to interview you. She says, well, am I going to be famous again?
Oh, wow.
She's a real estate agent.
Wow.
I know, well, maybe. And I told her about the show that's in L.A., and you should go to it. She didn't know anything about these shows, nothing. So I got the booking agent of the show, and I got her in to be right next to Beaver and Tony Dow.
Fantastic.
So she's getting their lines are the biggest lines at the show.
I'm sure,
except for Richard Dreyfuss. Richard Dreyfuss had a bigger line, but they had the second biggest lines to and it's $30 a pop. To sign a picture and $15 to take a picture.
That's a pretty good
deal.
So
by the time they get to her, and she doesn't look anything, of course, like she did.
Sure.
And people aren't recognizing her. They come over to the table, and either they're out of money, or she was bypassed. But just the overflow that she got, just the overflow of them. She said, this is fantastic. I mean, this is great. She was in seventh heaven. And so then recently, though, I haven't heard from her. I even got her an agent.
Oh, that's great.
To do senior. Yeah, but she didn't show up. I don't know. She showed up, but she's not quite with it. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
Anyways, I felt really good. And they hadn't seen her in a long time. So I was sort of their... I was playing Ralph Edwards, this is your life.
You recognize this voice? No, that's amazing, man. And yeah, that's, again, this is a familiar story of, people that were, celebrities and don't know about the convention circuit. And it can be it could be a great thing where they rediscover their fans. There was a great Batman artist from years ago who had never done conventions until the very end of his life. And really, it brought him to tears when so many people would go up to him at San Diego Comic-Con and said how much they appreciated his art. And it's like, I didn't know. I mean, especially in the case of an artist like that. But yeah, I mean, how many decades were between the Beaver show and Judy coming back and doing a convention like that? That's wonderful.
Yeah, I don't know, 50 years from now, if that would exist. I mean, there's going to be just a few people like... Okay, yeah, I remember Jesse Smollett.
Yeah.
Or people that
I think it'll continue. I personally think it'll continue because if
really,
there's
so many of them.
Well, but also now fandom is more organized than it ever was. I mean, you grew up, you grew up in the generation where Gene Roddenberry himself had to kind of go to the fans and mount a fan letter campaign to keep Star Trek on the air back in the 60s. And now, they do it themselves. God, that Spider-Man cartoon that won the Oscar this year and everything, and with that new Spider-Man character, Miles Morales, that was all generated by, a lot of it was the studios waking up to the fact that there were a lot of fans of that version of Spider-Man, as much, or not as much, but certainly a significant amount, like Peter Parker, and they're like, well, let's do this with both Spider-Men and, see what happens. And now Miles Morales, because of that movie, is huge with the kids, and it's, he's become another household name. Or those Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I mean, God, in the 70s, those characters were around, and they were like the bottom barrel of Marvel hero characters. And now they're Disney. I mean, good Lord, they're making tons of merchandise with Rocket Raccoon and Groot and all these other characters. It's incredible. So I get what you're saying, and you're right. It's definitely.
But will they remember the characters? There's so many characters to remember. I mean, how are they going to remember them all? I mean,
I don't know, man.
There's going to be standout ones. But like I said, I mentioned, who did I mention before? With the Beverly Washburn. Now, she was a big, who's Beverly Washburn? I don't know her. And then I saw her picture. I said, oh my God, she was in so many things. She was never a big hit. But she was in, they use these people over and over and over again.
Yes.
Today, they're not even a commodity. They're an afterthought.
Yeah, but you never know, because God, now I'm blanking on her name from Big Bang Theory, the blonde lead. She was in 8 Simple Rules of Dating My Daughter, John Ritter's last television show, and she was the young, cute daughter there, and then she was in Charmed before getting Big Bang Theory. I mean, I know, again, you watch Perry Mason and you see so many wonderful actors, lead actors and character actors when they were children doing Perry Mason. The same went for Kojak in the 70s and Miami Vice in the 80s and Law and Order in the 90s.
I think that's why Twilight Zone. I think that's why Twilight Zone's so popular.
My God, Lee Marvin. Yeah, everybody.
Unbelievable.
Bronson, Elizabeth Montgomery, Lee Marvin. Absolutely, man. And or another one of your subjects, Marion Ross, Mrs. Cunningham from Happy Days. You find out her whole career and the various television and films that she did. God, I was watching a Jamie Farr thing on the Television Academy's Oral Histories, and of course, Klinger on MASH. I didn't know he was in The Greatest Story Ever Told. He's one of the apostles in The Greatest Story Ever Told.
Yeah, that's right.
Or he pops up on a very politically incorrect episode of Andy Griffith these days, where he and Vito Scotti are gypsies, and it's really a very again, I can't believe they still run the episode on syndicated TV, because it's like, wow, man, this is red flags in today's environment of each nationality standing up and complaining if something isn't depicted properly or whatever. But no, Jamie Farr was he's on F Troop. He was a delivery boy on Dick Van Dyke. It's kind of or Mary Tyler Moore before she hit big on the Dick Van Dyke Show, on being just her legs on Richard Diamond or the Happy Hop Point Dancing Girl and stuff. And these are the old examples. But I have a feeling that now, especially, nostalgia conventions are really part of the culture. I don't think they're going away. I really don't.
They're not going away for a while, because they're bringing people back from the 80s and 70s.
Exactly.
But I don't know about now. I'm talking about what's going on right now.
No. I understand. You're talking about the conventions of 2040. I understand. No, you're
right. For what's right now, I'm not with it. My whole life is living in the past, so I'm proud of it.
Yeah, but that's great, man. Because again, through your book and through your podcast, you're getting the true story from these people when they're still around, and because I find that a lot of fans my age and younger that speak of their fondness for these shows will sometimes imprint their own perceptions and impressions of these shows without ever really talking to the people that made it. And they might have a rose-colored view of how things went, or even a bad view of how things went. So it's really great to get these first-hand stories from these people while they're still around and can share their story. I think it's an important part of our pop culture, and I really think, as the saying goes, you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. So I applaud you for your book and for your podcast, man. Nice going. This is great.
Thank you. It's been a thrill on Blueberry Hill.
I bet it has, man.
I found my thrill on Blueberry Hill.
What can you promote any upcoming guests?
Yes.
Or a hint,
let's see.
if you don't want to spoil.
Well, I got a call, and I'm taking an interview from somebody who has absolutely nothing to do with show business, but I'm a nice Jewish boy, and he wrote a book on the Holocaust.
Okay.
And he's a professor, but he's also somebody who's been a guest on one of those talking heads. And I'm going to go back. I have an upcoming interview with Max Gale from the Barney Miller Show.
Hey, that's fantastic. Yes, Wojciechowicz.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
So, yeah, and I've talked to him a few times in person. Where is that note on? Well, it's about the Holocaust. A new book about the Holocaust. His mother was part of it, and escaped at the very last minute. And but there's a different perspective to it. And I'm going to use that part of my podcast because we're going to talk about the difference between baby boomers viewing the Holocaust and what's being taught in school today. So
sure.
I'm going off in a different direction.
That's
and
great,
Wesley Ure is coming up, and is that the right name? From Land of Giants.
Wow.
Little boy.
My God. That's great.
Yeah, Wesley Ure. And he's somebody who has been in Mexico for 6 months. I met him a long time ago. We were going to do this, but he didn't want to do it from Mexico. So he lives in Palm Beach. And he was on Sid and Marty Krofft's type of stuff.
Oh, crazy.
And, yeah, he was in Land of the Lost, or was it the Land of the Giants? I get those two mixed up. I think it's the Land of the Lost.
Oh, I see. Okay, because,
Land of the Lost. Land of the Giants was way before that. That was Conway.
Well, but anybody who worked on the Sid and Marty Krofft shows has got to have some great stories, too. Absolutely. Butch Patrick, another person that you've got a chapter on, and he had his time in Lidsville with Sid and Marty Krofft, and, of course, the Munsters.
Yes.
No, that's awesome, man. It's fantastic. The podcast is Baby Boomers, plural, Talk Radio, and that's the website as well. And the book is called Shooting the Breeze. Thanks a lot, man. It was a real pleasure, and truly, congratulations. And like I said, we're doing the same thing, and I'm happy to help promote your stuff. Keep it up. That's wonderful. Good luck with the podcast and everything. That's Torchy Smith. Make sure you check out Shooting the Breeze with Baby Boomer stars, both the website and the book from Torchy Smith. Unbelievable stuff. And again, go to his website, babyboomerstalkradio.com. And you could buy the novel there. You could buy it at Amazon as well. But it was a real pleasure talking to Torchy, and I wish him nothing but luck as he continues on his traveler's path and his interesting podcast interviews. Thanks a lot for listening to today's Word Balloon. It was all brought to you by Aftershock Comics. Word Balloon is brought to you by Aftershock Comics, one of the leading independent publishers on the scene today, inviting their comic audiences to read dangerously. There's tremendous titles that come out from Aftershock, including Animosity from Marguerite Bennett, A Walk Through Hell from Garth Ennis, Dark Ark from Cullen Bunn, and Baby Teeth from Donny Cates. There's also The Replacer from Zach Thompson that debuted this week. Aftershock is pushing the envelope even further in 2019 with more new releases: Stronghold from Phil Hester and Ryan Kelly, Oberon from Ryan Parrott, Dark Red from Tim Seeley, and also Out of the Blue and Horde, just to name a few. They're going to cut across all genres to take readers far beyond their comfort zones. Now, in the weeks ahead, we'll be talking to more Aftershock creators about their books, but you don't have to wait. Check out full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on these books to order through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. And, of course, Word Balloon brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners via Patreon. If you want to subscribe to Word Balloon, go to patreon.com/wordballoon. And, again, thank you for your support, League of Word Balloon listeners. Thanks a lot for listening. We have 2 other episodes that are out there today, featuring conversations with my radio mentor who passed away, unfortunately, last week, the great Chet Kopic. A very personal conversation that I had with him 6 months ago about one of his books. We talk a bit about boxing, but I really wanted to present this because people sometimes want to know about my own past and what got me into radio and into doing interviews. Well, Chet was a real mentor, and I was a guest on his show back in the 80s and 90s, and he really was just a great guy. We worked together in the early 2000s at the Sporting News Radio Network. I always had great conversations, and the one you'll hear today with Chet is a classic example of that. So Chet Kopic is another great episode available today on Word Balloon, and a great talk with Christopher Irving, another guy who wrote a great book, a great comic history book called Leaping Tall Buildings. He did the interviews, and my buddy Seth Kushner did the incredible photography, and Chris interviewed a bunch of creators from the Golden Age all the way up through the webcomic age. So it's a really great look at the history of comics. He has done countless interviews with comic creators going back to the 90s and had a real opportunity to talk to a lot of great Golden and Silver Age creators before they passed away. And he is in the midst of a Kickstarter campaign because he has made trading cards with the cooperation of the Will Eisner estate that feature Eisner's greatest creation, the Spirit. 50 cards, they sound amazing. We talk about his encounters with Will Eisner, and it's a great conversation, and we really get into a lot of comic book history. Christopher Irving and Chet Kopic, two of the other episodes available to you today at wordballoon.com and on the Word Balloon podcast feed. So check them out. Thanks again for listening. We've got more to do in April before we finish up. Plenty to do, and lots of great interviews coming up later this week. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2019.